It is a Purple Friday, and it is December 20th. Welcome inside the vault for a Ravens Lunch Hour live stream. I'm Bobby Trossett, as always, joined alongside Sarah Ellison and partner. Of course, Week 16 commenced last night. We'll get to that in just a bit because the AFC playoff picture is really starting to get very interesting. And the interest right now, though, nationally is on this game that we're going to be covering tomorrow. And I don't think there's any question about that. It's rematch and round two for the Ravens and Steelers. It's a 4:30 kickoff inside the bank. Looking forward to having some pregame coverage out at the BMore Around Town tailgate. And you and I, of course, will be back around, 8:30-ish, depending on how long the game and the press conferences go post-game for our post-game live stream. So with that, welcome inside the channel. We're glad you're here on this Friday. Today's live stream is presented to you by one of this month's small business Patreon title sponsors, our guy, and his name is Guy, and that is Guy Conger. Appreciate you, Guy, for all the support that you give us through Patreon. If you guys are interested in doing the same, visit patreon.com/RavensVault podcast. It's been a busy morning, Sarah, because there was a segment on ESPN and First Take that kind of lit up the fan base a little bit. But really, the only lighting up that happened was what Chris Canty and Stephen A. Smith, or I should say Cam Newton, meaning Chris Canty and Cam Newton, did to Stephen A. Smith. And that's what we're going to cover right off the top today.
We're going to cover that off the top. And Bobby, you're doing what me and Lamar have been doing. So mostly Lamar. I don't know if you noticed, but Lamar's been wearing, with his mouthpiece, the color of his opponent. I wore blue on game day against the Giants. You, sir, on Steelers week are wearing black and gold, and the chat has noticed it. But I got to say, like the clean haircut, that's looking good, all of it. But I don't know. Are you pulling a Lamar where you're wearing, it's like the mouthpiece of the opponent, the color of the opponent? Is that what we're doing here?
I'm just going to do something here. I'm going to turn off my lighting for a half second because I think it's illuminating me.
Oh, you're claiming that's not gold.
Yeah, I don't think this is. No, I don't.
Turn it off.
Matter of fact, it's not. Okay. All right. This ain't gold. This ain't yellow.
It still looks yellow and gold to me.
Well, of course it does.
Listen, it's all good. Right. I wore blue on the Giants game. I mean, it just happens.
Well, you know what's funny? Cameron is reminding me that Jimmy Smith showed up to the pregame show at B-More and came on my show last year on Steelers week. He wore straight up like it was like a yellow puffer jacket. I was like,
right.
Okay. But anyway, if that's the case, if that's what if your taste buds or your eyesight out there in the audience think this is yellow and you're upset about it, then channel that energy going into tomorrow, because it is going to be a rematch. You're going to need all that energy. And by the way, we know Steelers country travels really well. We're talking about really well to West Coast games, to games that are far away from Pittsburgh. This is an easy drive, an easy bus ride, an easy whatever. And you better believe they're going to be showing up in droves. So that means the Ravens flock got to do 10 times what the expectation is for Pittsburgh.
Well, listen, you're looking clean with the new haircut, regardless of whatever color it is. You look great today. And you're talking about energy. I've got energy because I feel like Cam Newton has been listening to the vault and given some good arguments that we've had here that I've been preaching here for at least a week, if not more. And he takes it directly to Stephen A. Smith on First Take. And it's the whole thing. It's the whole doubled standard that Stephen A. and Shannon Sharpe isn't in the studio for this. But Shannon Sharpe and Stephen A. have admitted to having double standards. And Cam Newton is calling him out on it and doesn't want to hear it anymore. Check this out.
To make this point on national TV, Stephen A.
Yes, sir.
You must watch what you say about Lamar Jackson.
Yes, sir.
And I don't appreciate it. And respectfully, I see how you talk about Lamar and those certain things. It's like, bro, he's just the greatest quarterback in the league. And we so far forget, like, yo, Josh
I don't think
Allen,
he's the greatest quarterback in the league.
Right now,
Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback in the league.
Right now, I'm taking Lamar Jackson over any other quarterback in the NFL,
including Josh Allen. Including Josh Allen.
Hey. Oh, and that's what I'm trying to tell you, Stephen A. You gotta watch what you say about Lamar Jackson because you ain't holding Josh Allen to the same standards as you're holding Josh Allen. Because you say, oh, man, everything, first ballot, all this, all man. Man, Chris, you know the only reason why he struggles versus the Pittsburgh Steelers, and a lot of reasons, is because they're a divisional opponent. They know him the best.
Okay.
When you're playing for the Giants, you know the Redskins going to play you tough. The Cowboys going to play you tough. These are divisional games. So I'm sorry, the Commanders. But what I'm saying about Lamar Jackson, we're holding him to this standard. And I love the critiques. I love the analytics, but he's the greatest quarterback in the game right now.
Sarah, the screenshot, my favorite screenshot to come from the segment is up on the screen. And for the audio-only audience, it's Cam with a devilish smile on his face. It's a split screen of Stephen A., Chris Canty, and Cam. And the quote on the screen, though, is what you just heard him say a couple times. And he's saying he's taking Lamar over any other quarterback in the NFL. And part of that transcription reads as follows: "You must watch what you say about Lamar Jackson, and I don't appreciate it," referring to Stephen A.'s past coverage of Lamar, and really within that segment too. He says, you got to watch what you say about Lamar because you ain't holding Josh Allen to the same standards.
Facts.
He's the greatest quarterback in the game right now, referring to Lamar Jackson. How about it?
Well, and that's where, I mean, he absolutely is. He absolutely is. And he knows he is, but he keeps trying to justify it. He's trying to justify it by using the two-time MVP. And so when Cam Newton calls him out, Stephen A. comes back and he's like, I'm not watching what I'm saying about Lamar. And he's like, because I'll say it to his face. They do need to, the Ravens and Lamar need to win more, and they gotta hit a certain level. And nobody is denying that. Lamar wants to beat the Steelers. Lamar wants to beat Patrick Mahomes. Lamar wants to get out of the AFC Championship, make it to the Super Bowl, and win it. If you simply said that, nobody would have a problem. The problem comes in when you say, oh, but Lamar has no excuses and Josh Allen does. Okay? They both have made it to the same place. And that's where Chris Canty came in, because Stephen A. Smith tried to stand his ground, saying, I will say what I want to. And that's when Chris Canty came in.
Oh, Cam Newton, I am not going to watch what I say about Lamar Jackson. I'm going to say what I continue to say. He is phenomenal and great, but he got to deliver. And I'm going to say the same thing about Josh Allen. He got to deliver too. Yes.
Okay, pause. If he ended it there, nobody would have a problem. Nobody would have a problem. All right? Keep going here.
That's all I'm saying.
As long as you include Josh Allen
no
in that
problem.
same breath when you talk about Lamar Jackson.
No problem.
Because we got to go there. Because
Lamar.
Lamar.
I ask you a question, though.
Go ahead.
Isn't it true that Josh Allen has performed better in the postseason than Lamar Jackson?
Yes.
That's all I got to say.
True.
That's all I got to say.
That's true. But what does that mean? What does that mean, though? Both of them have been in one conference championship game, and both of them have lost. So, I mean, you have more postseason wins. That's great. Hold on, Stephen A. I got you on this one.
Please.
How did the season end for the Buffalo Bills the past 2 years?
That's fair. Totally right.
In the divisional round at home.
Totally right.
So if we go and crush Lamar Jackson for losing to Patrick Mahomes in the conference championship game in Baltimore last year, we got to do the same thing to Josh Allen. MVP trophy be damned.
Was he inside the vault earlier this week? Because you and I had this same conversation, did we not? Like, you brought up Josh Allen's playoff record, which is fair to bring it up. He has more wins. Perhaps if Lamar had to go and play in the wild card more often, maybe he would have 2 more wins on his belt, but he's advanced to the divisional round twice, skipping that wild card. And so I made the same point, and you thought it was fair that they both have advanced to the AFC Championship game. Both at home, is that correct? Was that at home for the Bills? Is that what Canty just said?
Buffalo would have been on the road, I believe.
Okay, but they both made it to the AFC Championship game. They both lost, and they both lost to Patrick Mahomes, same person. And so we just had that conversation 2 days ago, and I'm happy to see Chris Canty bring it to the face of Stephen A. to make him respond to it.
Well, you used an actual phrase, an actual word earlier in the week that Cam used today. So you were out in front of it. And what was that word? It starts with a P.
Propaganda.
You did. And some some kind
I called
of
it from Bill's
take.
Mafia. I felt like Bill's Mafia successfully put Bill's propaganda in that last year Josh beat Lamar in the stats game, and that's just not true. That's just not true. And that they felt like Josh was number 2. He finished number 5 in the voting. So that's where I was bringing in propaganda. Yes.
Well, Cam brought it in from this year's conversation, and it had everything to do with the statistical breakdown that we've talked about at nauseum through 15 weeks when you compare Lamar to Josh. Here's Cam.
Is that you're holding Lamar Jackson to this standard that he's set. But when you talk about Josh Allen, everybody's forgetting. When I was so surprised about this statistic, and I know we have to rock. Lamar Jackson is beating Josh Allen in every single statistic outside of the overall team record and rushing touchdown.
Yep.
The propaganda of the NFL was like, yo, Josh Allen's the favorite to win the MVP.
That's fair, bro.
To do this and do that. And I'm saying to myself, hold on. Only reason why Lamar Jackson ain't leading in rushing touchdowns is because he got King Derrick Henry. So let's put things into perspective here. And I'm saying to myself, I don't like the propaganda that's going on. Lamar Jackson is having an unbelievable year.
And Bobby, it does kind of feel like propaganda when MVP voters are declaring it over with 3 games still to play. And those 3 games just happen to be losing teams for the Bills, and they happen to be playoff teams for the Ravens.
2 of the 3.
2 of the 3, and Lamar's coming off of a win against the Giants and a bye week, while Josh Allen is coming off two bigger games against the number 1 seed, especially in the Lions. And so now they want to declare it over just because the schedules matched up, where those 2 games he was phenomenal against those playoff teams, and he deserves that credit. But to call it over when he gets that platform and Lamar is waiting on a bye and then gets the Giants, and you don't give him the chance to show what he can do against playoff teams in December, that's why it feels like propaganda. When Cam said that he was surprised that Lamar was number 1 in all of those categories except for record and rushing touchdowns, that's crazy that he didn't know that. And that's crazy that that's just the first time it's brought to Stephen A. And he's like, oh, okay, that's fair. Like, that's all. Like, we've been seeing that all year long. And Cam was surprised by it. And he's pulling for Lamar, and he was surprised by it.
There's more to be said on this topic, which we'll get to in just a second, but we have some breaking news, and that is that Nelson Agholor, Sarah, who remains in concussion protocol, has been downgraded to out for tomorrow's game against the Steelers. So Nelly will not be available. Here's the update on Rashod Bateman that Albert Breer gave last night on Amazon.
Ravens have some injury issues of their own. Rashod Bateman was injured in practice yesterday. They were concerned his foot injury could be serious. After testing, it doesn't look like it's that serious. He wore a boot around the facility as a precaution today. He'll meet with trainers tomorrow to check on his availability for Saturday. And one more.
All right. So again, no Nelson Agholor. If you're just tuning in, he has not been able to clear concussion protocol or won't have enough time to do so before the 4:30 game tomorrow. And as we covered yesterday in sort of other breaking news fashion at the end of our live stream, Rashod showed up, as you heard Albert say, with a practice injury to his foot. He was seen by local beat reporters with a boot on that foot, and now he is listed as questionable. So, Sarah, going into Ravens Steelers, we know that George Pickens will be down for Pittsburgh, and now it looks like the Ravens are going to be down at least one of their, secondary guys to Zay Flowers.
It's funny because after that John Harbaugh press conference yesterday, which, as you said, came on at the end of our show yesterday, at that point, it looked like there was more optimism for Nelson than there was for Bateman. And it's almost like they flipped because obviously Nelson's out now, as you just reported. And Bateman, based off of what Breer just said, is that first, we didn't know this. We assumed it, but it wasn't confirmed. He reported that Bateman did indeed hurt it in practice. And then second of all, the boot was precautionary. And then third of all, it's not that serious and they will test him Saturday. That doesn't mean Bateman will play, but it's not as dire as it looked maybe yesterday at this time.
Yeah. So potentially, if for whatever reason Bate won't go or they want to be careful with him because of his importance down the stretch, the Ravens would be looking at a wide receiver room of Zay Flowers, Tylan Wallace, the rookie Tez Walker, with the potential position to call up somebody from the practice squad, like an Anthony Miller type. So that's where they stand right now. Again, if you're just tuning in, Nelson Agholor remains in concussion protocol. He has been downgraded to out, and Rashod Bateman remains questionable. You had more to say on Dan Orlovsky, who had more to say about what he's been saying all week long, which is that Josh Allen is his front runner for NFL MVP.
So I like this. This is I don't know, maybe 30 seconds. So what the clips we just showed was from today's First Take. It was right before we came on air. Yesterday, Dan Orlovsky was on there, and they were having this conversation of whether it's okay to say that Josh Allen has it locked up. And not surprisingly, Stephen A. Smith agreed with Dan Orlovsky, and they're basically saying, yeah, it's locked up. And Stephen A. is saying that doesn't mean that Josh gets to go out and play like trash, but if he plays at a high level and Lamar plays at a high level going forward, then he's like he still has the MVP. And it's like, okay, that's fair, but then that doesn't mean that has it locked up. Okay, because there are 3 games to play. That is not the definition of locked up. You're saying that Dan still has to play well, and you're assuming he will, and yet you're not also taking in the strength of schedule going forward, but that's a discussion for another time. Dan went a little bit further in explaining why he has Josh Allen ahead of Lamar, and I responded to him this morning based off of this clip on Twitter, but let's play the clip, and then I'll explain my response to Dan on his argument here.
We also have lost sight of the award. Lamar is having a great season. Lamar is going to have great seasons every year he's breathing, essentially. So if it's not the great player award, it's the MVP, the most valuable player award. If we just sparsed out the offenses and talked about the difference in talent, Buffalo, I would tell you, 1 through 11 is a lesser talented offense than the Baltimore Ravens. The quarterback performance is elevating the group. That is the value of that role. We can't just fall into the trap of, well, Lamar's having a great season, so every year that Lamar has a great season, he's the MVP. He has great seasons every year. Guess what? Next year, Lamar's going to have a great year.
Yeah. Okay, so I responded to him today this morning with 2 questions based off of that clip. So he's obviously emphasizing the word valuable in most valuable player, which is fair. And so he quote retweeted that video that we just showed and put the word elevation. So he's saying, for me, in my MVP vote, I want to see which player elevates their team the most. And as you heard, he says that he feels like on offense, the Ravens have better weapons. I think that's probably true when you have a Hall of Fame running back next to your side. But why is my question to him when I followed up is, why aren't you considering more than just the offense? And again, Lamar is overcoming a offensive line that hasn't been great, 3 new starters. But my point to him is why are you only looking at the offense alone? I think they're both elevating their offenses for sure. Neither one has like this future Hall of Fame wide receiver. Okay, I think both of them probably middle of the pack. Maybe the Ravens have a better one. I don't know. I mean, Josh has Keon Coleman, a nice rookie. He's got Amari Cooper, and I'm forgetting his last one. Not that nobody to write home about, but neither, Zay and Bateman have been holding it down, which nobody predicted that from Bateman. Okay. So he's only looking at how Josh elevates the offense. So I replied and said, and I've been banging the drum on this show about this, and people first questioned me of why you even say it, and this is why. I asked him about the quarterback betrayal index, which measures the degree to which quarterbacks overcome poor play by their own team's defense and special teams. So the way that's calculated, you have your QB EPA rank minus your combined defensive and special teams EPA rank. When you subtract it, you see who has the greatest differential. Lamar Jackson, and I know this for a fact because I reached out to Mike Sando last night of The Athletic. He is the one who created this chart. I asked him if he had an update for all the way up until now in the season. He sent it to me late last night. This is the chart. Lamar Jackson leads the league in quarterback betrayal index. Justin Tucker has missed a total of 22 points worth of kicks. The Ravens have lost 5 games by a total of 22 points. On defense, the Ravens lost their defensive coordinator, their sack leader, their interceptions leader, and their starting inside linebacker. The pass defense right now is number 31. And yet, the Ravens are in position to capture the number 3 seed if they are able to finish in these last 3 games. And so I asked Dan, wouldn't you agree that demonstrates Lamar's value, since that's what he's emphasizing? And my second question to Dan, is there a chance that voters have Lamar Jackson MVP fatigue? Because in that clip, he said, quote, Lamar is going to have a great year every year that he's breathing, essentially. We can't just fall into the trap of Lamar is having a great season, close quote. And so, again, I understand that he's emphasizing value, but Bobby, shouldn't greatness be the foundational component of value? You can't be value if it's not undergirded by greatness. And so I asked him, you know, and this isn't to be like personal or whatever. I think this is just, this is a good faith debate. Is there a chance that consistent greatness is working against Lamar in the form of fatigue the way it did time and time again with LeBron James?
Yes.
I haven't gotten a reply, but those are two questions that I think if he's going to be transparent about his MVP vote, I think he needs to address those two things.
Just to be clear, the Buffalo targets that Josh has at his disposal, Amari, you mentioned him. Keon, the rookie, you mentioned him. Khalil Shakir was the third. So Khalil Shakir, and they got a talented tight end as well in Dalton Kincaid. And then, of course, we all know what they lost. Gabe Davis, but most notably Stephon Diggs and several pieces of their defensive puzzle. So interesting. I hope Dan gets back to you. I mean, he's one of the busiest guys in television, in sports media. Guys on just about every show and calling Monday night games from time to time, and obviously super talented. And like you said, it's a good faith debate. We had him on our show last year. We're a huge fan of his, but it's good back and forth that you guys are having, and I hope he gets back to you. Brooke Pryor is going to be joining us in just a minute or so for her Steelers perspective. DMV Nation dropped in a $19.99 super chat donation. Happy holidays, DMV. You're always hitting us with generous donations. We appreciate you. Let's also get in our patrons as well before we bring Brooke in. And of course, it's Guy Conger, who is the small business Patreon title sponsor of this show, and Ralph Parks. Thank you both for believing in what we're building. We appreciate the support. You guys can do the same if you're interested in doing so, which goes directly towards our show by visiting patreon.com/RavensVault podcast. We've got over 1,700 of you concurrently watching this afternoon. Please like the video on the way in, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and hit that notification bell so you can be notified of when we're dropping our daily live content. Why don't we talk about the injury report before Brooke gets in here in just a minute or so? And this is what it looked like yesterday. What we now know as of a couple minutes ago, and by the way, the Chiefs are indeed activating Marquise Brown. He's going to make his season debut on Saturday against Houston. That's not a surprise, but that just came down the timeline. Nelson Aguilar has been downgraded to out, as has Jalen Armour-Davis. We knew that yesterday. Bateman is questionable, as we referenced. Daniel Fa'alele with a knee is also questionable. Justice Hill's good to go. Adisa Isaac is good to go. Sanusi Kane, who's missed the last couple of games with a hamstring, is good to go. We all know Deontay Johnson is down. Dafe Owe is listed as questionable with an ankle. TJ Tampa has been activated. Sarah, the rookie out of Iowa State, at cornerback, and Ardarius Washington, who popped up this week with an ankle, will be good to go. No designation, no injury status. He's ready to roll. As promised, time to take a look at the Steelers. We've been doing it all week, but we know that this woman's one of the more, we're just talking about Orlovsky saying he's busy.
Yeah.
Look, Brooke is asking the tough questions in the scrums. She's in Bristol doing her ESPN things, what feels like multiple times a week. She's writing, and she's kind enough to come back on the show with us. So ESPN's Brooke Pryor joins us today. Happy holidays, Brooke. Great to have you back on with us. And man, you have just been rolling lately.
I mean, I kind of took the spirit of the 3 games in 11 days and said, well, this is my own personal gauntlet. So I'm just going to add in a studio day. Thankfully, it was in New York, not Bristol. So that was an easy train ride down to Philly. But yeah, it's been one thing after another, but I love it. I don't want to think. I just want to do.
Yeah, Brooke, I think I saw you on Get Up. Was it Get Up a couple weeks ago? I was like, she was very smooth and polished. You're like a print writer, I know, but put her on TV. I was like, and what's funny, it's almost like, what show is it? The Elf, where he's like, I know him. I'm just like, I know her. That's our girl. So we appreciate you coming back to us lowly folk, even though you've made it big on Get Up.
Well, I love coming on with you guys. And yeah, I mean, it worked out perfectly. It was right before the Philly game that I went on Get Up because not only are the Steelers interesting, but also I went to UNC. And I don't know if you guys have heard, they may have hired a former NFL coach that people are very interested to talk about. And, as an alum, I had a lot of thoughts. So it has really been a whirlwind in like the very best way.
I'm sure. Well, we're glad to have you on. We won't keep you too long, but we had Rob King on last month for the first time around. We were like, we got to circle back with her at some point. So that's exactly what we're doing today. And we ask you, what is the state of the Steelers entering Week 16 in a game? Should they win, they take the division crown.
Yeah, I really think that this is a game where the Steelers are going to figure out their trajectory for the rest of the season, which is crazy to say because they are a team that already has 10 wins. They've clinched a spot in the postseason, but it reminds me a lot of the 2020 season when they started out hot, 11-0, dropped a weird COVID rescheduled game to the Commanders, an NFC team that didn't have a ton of season implications, regular season implications, but that kicked off this stretch where they ended up then losing 4 of their last 5, hosted the Browns in the playoffs and lost. And it felt like at the time their best chance to win a playoff game since 2016. And so when I look at how they're positioned going into this Ravens game, this is really going to, I think, tell the team, tell all the people watching externally where this season will go after losing to the Eagles. And I don't think that they necessarily have to win this game to determine that outcome. It's more about how they play, how they're responding. I think winning would be huge, obviously, to get that AFC North title. I know Patrick Queen is a guy that is very motivated to get that title in Baltimore. But I think that they need to show, hey, the defense can get stops. They can tackle a lot better because against Philadelphia, it was atrocious. I thought maybe like all of the grease that they used to grease up the light poles for Super Bowls, maybe they just applied to the players the way that Steelers were just simply not able to bring them down. And I think offensively, I need to see Russell Wilson be able to sustain drives, be able to find somebody else down the field, not named George Pickens since he is not an option. And the run game, Arthur Smith compared it to an old truck this week that sometimes takes a while to get going and they kind of plod along. But then once they rev up, they can really rip off some long drives. Like I need to see a run game that doesn't require jumper cables to get started, to really know if this team has a shot to make the playoff run that it looked like they could be positioned to make after winning. The game in Cincinnati is the one that jumps to mind as the most complete football game. Even though they gave up a ton of yards, a ton of points, it still felt like, okay, this is a team that is not just going to make the postseason, but could make a run in the postseason. I need to see them get back to some of the things they did well in that game.
Brooke, after that loss against the Eagles, somebody in the Steelers media asked Mike Tomlin, like, what do you do to make sure that this doesn't snowball? And he gave a great answer. I mean, it's what you would want from a coach. Okay, let's not be dramatic. It was a loss, And yet at the same time, just to emphasize the importance of the game, obviously we know on the Ravens side, like if you lose this, you've lost the AFC North. But it was a legitimate question in that the Ravens need this. They both need it. Ravens probably slightly more desperate in terms of the AFC North. And sometimes that gives the edge to you. So that would mean something to have it snowball, even though Tomlin downplayed it, don't you think?
Yeah, and that person that asked it was me.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah, that was me. Mike Tomlin loves me in post games, if you can't tell. Because I was thinking about that 2020 season, and I had just talked to Dan Moore in the locker room the week before, and he wasn't on the team in 2020, but he was drafted right after that. And he said that is something that they talked about all the time, about teams can start off hot, but you've got to finish just as hot as you started if you want to be a legitimate team that, makes the postseason, makes a run in the postseason, and that you can't let one game derail the momentum that you had before that. And so, Mike Tomlin is going to dismiss the question, is going to dismiss the idea of letting it snowball. But when you look at the gauntlet that game kicks off, I mean, you have the Ravens, and then a couple days later, you play the Chiefs, and then the Bengals. I mean, the Steelers are lucky in a lot of ways that they've already clinched a playoff spot, courtesy of the Colts losing and the Dolphins losing. So at least that's kind of a load of pressure off. But you want to have the opportunity to host a first-round playoff game, because the last time they hosted one against the Browns was the COVID season and no one was in the stands. It was a very weird feeling. And I think the Steelers have a huge home advantage when they're in Acrisure. So they want to be playing for that. And I think that looking at this gauntlet of games, even the Bengals, even if they're not going to make the playoffs, they can still be a dangerous team, especially if they're still playing all their starters in that regular season finale. And so I think that it's a situation where you can't let that loss to the Eagles linger. You can't let those problems persist, particularly when I look at the offensive side of the ball. To me, that's the most concerning thing. I think the defensive, lack of tackles, missed tackles, things like that was kind of an aberration. I think that they're going to get that corrected. I think TJ Watt is healthy enough to play and be effective, but offensively, there were signs of things that have been a problem for the Steelers throughout the season. That, it's a lot of boom or bust. It's a lot of not drives that just can't be sustained, red zone execution issues. And it felt like maybe they had that put behind them in the one against the Bengals, in the second game against the Browns. But the Eagles game was a sign that, maybe everything is not fixed.
Definitely want to revisit that Watt conversation in just a bit, but because he is expected to go, I feel like, a more pressing issue for them is number 14 not being out there. And that is George Pickens, who had, I believe, 8 for 80 plus the first time these two teams met, even though we all know Pittsburgh did not score a touchdown. It was Chris Boswell who had 6 field goals that resulted in an 18-16 victory. Such a classic Ravens Steelers game. But what's undeniable, Brooke, is the numbers that you see up on the screen here, and Jonas Schaefer compiled them. I mean, this is night and day when Pickens is and isn't with the team. Yards per play drops from 11th to 32nd. Success rate goes from 18th to 32nd. Explosive play rate goes from 13th to 32nd. And we know these guys have been obviously a great connection with the famous moon ball. We know that Pickens is an absolute dog out there from a mentality standpoint. He brings a certain type of intensity. So I guess we ask you, it's not what does this offense look like? We know, we see it up on the screen right now, what it looks like. It's just, where do the Steelers go without Pickens for a third consecutive week?
I mean, the name that keeps popping to my mind is Mike Williams. Mike Williams is not George Pickens, but I think that he's the closest thing the Steelers have on their roster. And to give up a draft pick to trade for him at the deadline, it wasn't necessarily a ton of draft capital, but it's still an asset, especially for a team that does draft really well, especially in the last 2 years. I think that they have got to utilize him more. I know that, he had the game-winning touchdown catch against the Commanders, but that since then, really few and far between. They mainly just use him in 11 personnel. I'd like to see them use him a little bit more and not just put him out on the field, but throw the ball his way. He's really good in contested catches and these tight window catches. That's something that Russell Wilson loves to try. I don't know if it's a matter of he doesn't feel like he has the same rapport with Mike Williams that he has with George Pickens. There's just not as much trust there because it's a guy that's newer to the system. But I think that they've got to establish another vertical threat to open everything else up. Calvin Austin, another guy that I think didn't get used very much in that first Ravens game, that has really come on a lot stronger recently. I love the moment in the Eagles game when Darnell Washington is getting into a fight with Slay in the end zone, and 5'9" generously Calvin Austin runs in to defend 6'7" Darnell Washington. But that just shows the fight that this guy has. I think they've got to use him more. And then I think Pat Freiermuth is going to be a big part of this game plan. Didn't necessarily have the biggest game the first time around against the Ravens, but he's had a touchdown in 3 straight weeks. He's become really dependable, really consistent. And I think that the passing game has got to go a lot through him. And again, just to open everything else up, because you saw against the Eagles without Pickens, they couldn't stretch the field. Everything got more compounded and they just couldn't run the ball. Najee Harris, of course, fumbles, and that's even worse. But it was, I think, a regression from what they had shown in the 2 games before that.
You both have mentioned TJ Watt. I'm going to play this video courtesy of Brian Botko of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you were there and you watched him live, Brooke. What percentage do you think he's going to be? Obviously, he's going to play. He's got no injury designation. He looks, I mean, listen, it's practice. He's not going to go all out. What percent do you think he'll be playing at? And can Ravens fans tone down their fears of him getting around, say, rookie Roger Rosengarten and getting a sack strip from behind?
I think that TJ Watt is going to be 75 to 85%. I mean, a normal guy, after they limp off the field with an injury like that, I would say 50%. But TJ Watt is not human. He can do just about anything and has, I think, just this incredible ability to bounce back from injuries. And I think that watching him not only in those moments in practice, but I'm thinking about watching him stretch. There's a stretch where he kind of he alternates what foot comes forward at an angle and is like stretching over top of it. But his ankle was at such an angle pressed against the ground. I thought, oh my gosh, my body can't do that regularly, but like much less when my ankle is sprained. That feels like it would be so incredibly painful. And yet he had no problem doing that, but he was doing a lot of lateral movement, a lot of running off to the side. So I think he's good to go. I also think that if he aggravates it, if he gets out on the field and realizes like, hey, practice was really light this week and we were going 25% and now I'm going 100% and that my body can't hold up. The depth that they have at outside linebacker in a guy like Alex Highsmith, who didn't play the first time around and has had some really big moments in these games. And then you also factor in Nick Herbig, who's having a really big second season, and Preston Smith, who was acquired at the trade deadline. I think the pass rush position is probably more equipped than most to deal with a player not playing at 100%, even if that player is an all-world guy like TJ Watt.
Who was it that went down right after they acquired Preston?
Alex Highsmith.
Okay,
believe that was Alex Highsmith. Yeah,
that was only a multi-week thing.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
He had an ankle sprain against the Colts, I believe. They've had injuries to every single member of that pass rush except Preston Smith. So knock on wood for his sake. But yeah, I mean, at first, the beginning of the season, it was Alex Highsmith had a groin, and then Nick Herbig had a hamstring issue that lingered for a while. Highsmith comes back, then he sprains his ankle. And now TJ Watt dealing with this low ankle sprain. But I mean, by and large, they've got a pretty resilient group to not have to miss, substantial time or anyone have to go on IR.
That's what I remember about that week, because I don't believe Highsmith played week 11. And the thought was, okay, is there going to be a drop off to Preston Smith? Because, what I had heard prior to that acquisition or after the acquisition was we want him to be a rotational guy. But then when Highsmith goes down, he kind of, that they're asking a lot more of him. And so anyway, yes, tons of depth there. What about in the secondary? Because former Raven Deshaun Elliott listed as doubtful. What do you know about his situation? Obviously, he was talking a bunch of junk and had a very impactful game the first time around. He's a hard-hitting, hard-nosed guy, as I'm sure you've learned quickly during his time there. But where's he at right now?
Yeah, I think Deshaun Elliott is the guy that is most concerning for the Steelers that, looks like he's probably going to miss this game. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. I mean, the hamstrings are just really piling up on the Steelers side, but they missed him so much in that Eagles game because he's their best run stopper. He's their best tackler, has, I think, almost 100 tackles, if not more than 100 tackles. He's really been Johnny on the spot when, Nick Herbig has forced, I think 2 of Nick Herbig's forced fumbles have been collected by Deshaun Elliott, and he had a pick in the first game of the season. I mean, he has really flown under the radar when you look at, acquisitions like Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, Patrick Queen, but Deshaun Elliott has been their do-everything guy on the back end, and missing him a second straight game if he doesn't play, that's an area where I think Derrick Henry's got to look at that and say, oh, this is great news. Like, it's going to be not easy to gain yards on the Steelers, but that's one less guy who is an effective tackler not being out there. So I think that's really going to hurt them once again, especially, Terrell Austin, the defensive coordinator, was talking about it this week. Like, he goes under the radar. He's an unsung hero, but the difference he makes not only in, technical things like tackling, being in the right position, communication, he has this intangible energy as the trash talker, as kind of the motor of that defense, of that secondary. He, I think, complements Minkah Fitzpatrick really well, who's been really quiet this season and just quiet in general. He's not a very loud, talkative guy. Deshaun Elliott is all of that. And so I think that that's a guy that they're really going to wish they had. Dante Jackson, cornerback with the back injury. He's been dealing with that all season, listed as questionable. I would think he tries to give it a go. But he didn't finish the last game because that back injury popped back up and was an issue. So they are definitely, I think, the most banged up in the secondary, and that could end up being a problem.
Brooke, I think everybody knows the stat by now. The Ravens have lost 8 of the last 9 against the Steelers, 4 straight. If you talk to people in Baltimore, they talk about, well, Lamar didn't have to play some of them. They already had the AFC North locked up and like to bring in that context. But even when Lamar has played, do you, and I'm really curious about this, it's like the psychological question. Do you get the feeling that Tomlin is confident that he's got John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson's number, that he knows how to stop this duo? Do you get the feeling that he's got that confidence?
I think so. I mean, and I think part of that is because he's done it. I mean, the thing about Mike Tomlin is that he's never going to get comfortable, and I don't think he's ever going to, take his foot off the gas and say, well, I've got this guy figured out. I don't have to try as hard this week. That's never how he's going to operate. But I do think that not only for him, but this defense as a whole, there is a confidence that comes with the fact that they keep beating the Ravens and keep beating Lamar Jackson. And when you do it often enough, you start to feel like, especially in a game situation where maybe things don't start off well, or, Lamar Jackson has a big first half, whatever it is, in the back of your mind, you say, okay, I've just got to buckle down. I've done this before. I can do it again. And I think having been there, done that, seen it, know what it takes, gives the Steelers a better blueprint than most teams to be able to shut down Lamar Jackson.
And what do you think that blueprint has been?
I think a lot of it's the outside linebackers. This is a game that guys have made such a huge mark on. I think Alex Highsmith had an interception in one of them. TJ Watt has been all over the place. Bud Dupree had some big games. I think that it's just the way that the pass rush is able to attack Lamar Jackson, and they're able to contain him. And I think that that's just a big difference. And also maybe Mike Tomlin has a voodoo doll of Lamar Jackson. That's, maybe that's the big difference maker, because it is kind of mystical the way that they're able to just completely shut him down.
I feel like the disguises they deploy too, like they're throwing the kitchen sink at him. They have the athletes, to your point, on the edges to contain him. They compress the pocket. They make him turnover prone. Like, we've all seen the statistics in those 5 games. And what also should be a part of the conversation, which came up this week, and Aaron Schatz did a good job of explaining it as well. As you know, Brooke, probably this is just the second home game that he'll have faced the Steelers in his career. A lot of them have been due to just circumstances that have to do with rest, potentially in the weeks that they already, and in the years, I should say, that they had the first round bye and the top overall seed locked up. COVID during 2020. He wasn't a starter yet in 2018. Joe Flacco had that position. And then of course, injuries plagued him in 2021 and 2022. But tell you what, so they have his number in those 5 games. And they certainly have Mark Andrews' number. This is a staggering statistic right here. Mark has played 10 games against Pittsburgh so far, no touchdowns. This is the all-time franchise leader who just hit that number in that category last weekend. In 26 games played against Cleveland and Cincinnati, he's tallied up 18. So what do you think the game plan is for Mark Andrews, especially given the thin nature of where the Ravens currently stand at? Because I don't know if you really, right before you just came on, Nelson Aguilar has been ruled out and Bateman's questionable and was seen yesterday with a walking boot. So just to catch you up to speed on that, I'm sure you've already seen it.
Well, and it's funny too, because as we are talking, the Steelers have downgraded Deshaun Elliott to out. So talk about how thin things are going to be. That does not help the Steelers at all, especially I think against Mark Andrews. And I think that this is going to be a game where they're going to need, I don't know if it's Minkah Fitzpatrick, Joey Porter Jr., instead of being, matched up on a wide receiver with all the injuries they have, that he's going to have to just treat Mark Andrews like that receiving threat, you know, and hack a Shaq the way that he has before on guys like T. Higgins. I mean, Mark Andrews is going to be a problem because he's rolling on a hot streak right now. But it is kind of insane. I don't think I realized that he had not scored a touchdown in 10 games against the Steelers. I covered Mark Andrews when he was at OU. And I mean, he and Baker Mayfield had this great rapport, great connection. It's really great to see him succeeding the way he is in the NFL. But I don't think I put together that I actually had not seen him score a touchdown in person in the NFL since I've been covering the Steelers. That is a very odd anomaly.
Brooke, I know you probably got to go to get that news out. I know you need to tweet it and put it everywhere on the socials. So we'll get you out of here on this. What's your prediction for the game tomorrow? I keep wanting to say Sunday, but it's Saturday.
I know. I think it's going to be a close one. I know the spread is like 6.5 or whatever, which is just insane. I think maybe some of that has to do with TJ Watt's status being somewhat in doubt earlier this week. I kind of think the Ravens are going to win, but it's going to be a weird one, like 17-15, a low-scoring game.
A weird one.
I know. That's never happened in this series before. But I think the idea of Lamar Jackson never playing the Steelers in front of a crowd in Baltimore, I wonder how much of a difference that ends up making in this game. I think it's going to come down to the wire because when has it not? But I do think the Ravens have the edge and they're going to come out on top.
Brooke, not only can you ask the tough questions in media scrums, but you can multitask tweet. That right there should be celebrated. We appreciate you for coming on as always. Let everybody know where you can be found. We already had your Twitter up on the screen, your X handle, but and anything that you have coming up over the next 24 hours or so that maybe would whet some appetites.
Yeah, so there's a story coming out on ESPN.com tomorrow about Ryan Shazier and his transition from player to coach. He's been working with the Steelers running backs this year. I reported on this all the way back in training camp, so I'm really excited for it to finally be coming out tomorrow.
Awesome. Talk about a full circle moment too. That's awesome. So, Brooke, happy holidays. I'm sure we'll be seeing you on our TV screens in the coming weeks, and enjoy Saturday.
Absolutely. Happy holidays, guys. Thanks for having me.
Same to you.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Brooke.
Brooke Pryor, ESPN's finest. Literally,
she was
definitely
like multitasking, which is allowed for sure.
She's the best. You can go find her work online at BE Pryor, and we appreciate her and her time. So,
how funny was it that she was the one that asked the question?
Oh yeah,
about
and not only that.
Yeah.
She's the one that had George Pickens spill the beans on his status like earlier in the year. She generated some great answers yesterday from Russell Wilson about Lamar, being that he's closing in on Michael Vick's all-time record. She's a star. I really enjoy her. So
she's got that job for a reason.
And she never says no to us. It's just like she'll always make it work. So anyway, shout out Brooke Pryor. Now it's time for our predictions. She mentioned it. It's a 6.5 point spread in favor of the Ravens. The over-under is set at 44.5. Sarah, you've already said it, and we've said it time and time again. Pittsburgh has owned this series in recent years. 8 of the last 9, 4 in a row. Division on the line, of course. If Pittsburgh wins, they take the AFC North. If the Ravens win, obviously they'll lock up at the very least a wild card berth with more work to do in order to get the AFC North. No George Pickens, no Deshaun Elliott. TJ Watt is expected to go. For the Ravens, we know they're going to be without Nelson Aguilar, and Rashod Bateman is questionable. We know that. Aguilar was just downgraded to out. If you're just tuning into the show, that's where things currently stand. What say you? Prediction.
Well, I think that she did a good job of outlining the blueprint, and I'm glad that she just she, in a sense, I mean, she gave credit to Tomlin for sure, but then she's like, but it's just great outside linebacker play, and that's got to be a huge, massive part of it. I mean, the theme for sure this year is the Ravens have struggled against elite defensive lines, and that includes the outside linebackers on the edge. Bobby, let me see if I have this in here. Where did I put this? Here it is. Okay. This is the key to the game. And I know we always say that turnovers are the key to the game, but sometimes you just say that in passing. But I've never seen it more true because it's such a part of the Steelers' strategy. As Tony Lombardi pointed out from Russell Street Report, he said the Steelers' success in 2024 is predicated upon opponents making more mistakes than them. The Ravens have had 9 turnovers in the last 4 games versus Pittsburgh, all one-score losses. And you know that Monken knows that too, which is why he had those ball security drills. On 11-17, the Ravens missed 2 field goal attempts, had 3 turnovers and 12 penalties, and lost by 2. The path to victory is obvious. The Ravens, if you look at their turnover margin, they're a +2, which is ranks 13th in the league. The Steelers are +18, which is first in the league. That is their strategy. Keep it close with an elite defense. Make the other team commit a turnover. And if possible, hit one deep, but George Pickens is out. So they don't have that. So now this really comes down to, are the Ravens going to truly fix their mistake-prone ways? Bobby, if the Ravens lose, I think it'll be by 4 points or less. Something like 23-21. But if the Ravens win, I think it's because they won't have these mistakes. And so if they don't have these mistakes, I think it could be a 10-point win. Because unless you gift the Steelers field advantage, you give them these short fields, they cannot move the ball. With TJ Watt hobbled and Deshaun Elliott out and George Pickens out, and this being a home game, I have the Ravens. They could blow it. They could beat themselves. They surely could. But I'm going to bet that the Ravens have their mistakes put together enough against this team, and they'll be smart. And so I have the Ravens actually, because I'm predicting a win, I actually think it'll be a bit bigger. I think they'll win by 10. So whether you want to say 27-17, 24-14, I'll do that. But that's all predicated upon the Ravens not shooting themselves in the foot and turning the ball over.
Okay. I got burnt on a high score the first time around. I can't do it again. I can't get burnt again. I thought that I was going to go in that direction week 11, and obviously 18-16 was anything but. Pittsburgh wins the game with 6 freaking field goals, as we've discussed, from Chris Boswell. Now, with that said, with no Pickens, if they couldn't score a touchdown, Sarah, with Pickens on the field, obviously your confidence doesn't exactly skyrocket without Pickens on the field. And we've mentioned the statistics, how much of a drop-off there is. But Pittsburgh's a prideful bunch, as is the Baltimore Ravens. I still think Russell Wilson and company will find a way, whether it's through Freiermuth, whether it's through Calvin Austin, or several other their playmakers, including Najee Harris, who is a pass-catching running back for them, of putting up some points. I am taking the Ravens. I'm going to go 24-20 in a game that you have to be able to withstand the funkiness, the inevitable funkiness. You know it's coming. What way is it going to come? I have no idea. Is it going to be a blocked punt? Is it going to be a ridiculous penalty that was a phantom call that changed the arc of the game? Is it going to be a Peyton Wilson-esque interception tearing it out of Justice Hill's hands? What's it going to be? You know it's going to somehow, some way, going to be a factor in this game. And can you be resilient? Can you withstand it? Can you play disciplined football? Can you play turnover-free football, which is what Tony was referencing there? So I'll go 24-20. I think this is going to be a game where the tight ends have to be a part of the equation. I'm talking about not just Mark Andrews, because if history repeats itself, they are going to have a plan for him. And it's going to be a successful plan. It's going to be an effective plan. So I'm talking about Isaiah Likely, somebody who's had a relatively quiet year when you look at it full body of work wise in terms of productiveness. And outside of there, you know, who's going to step up? And even if it is a target or two, is it going to be a Tylan Wallace who's had some big plays in the past? Is it going to be because of maybe earning a target or two off of what he did in his debut, or not his debut, but his first touchdown and first catch? Is it going to be a Tez Walker that cements his legacy, at least in the early going in this rivalry? 24-20, a game that is absolutely paramount. It is imperative that the Ravens fan base comes out. If you're thinking about it, if you're on the fence, purchase tickets. Get out there and enjoy it. You won't regret it because
Definitely don't let Steelers buy them.
The Steelers, exactly. The Steelers fan base travels better, as good as anybody across the league. And so that's what I'm going with. I see a lot of folks in the live chat weighing in with their predictions as well. Czar Wright says 34-6. Let's see. Who else has got predictions in here?
Well, as you're looking at those, can I say a couple things to what you just said?
Yeah.
Number one, your prediction of the Ravens winning. Bobby, you are damned if you do, damned if you don't, because they were like, well, now you better not jinx us, Bobby.
Oh, yeah.
They get mad if you pick against the Ravens, but yeah. Number two, the Ravens can't let this be a Justin Tucker game, and not just because he's off, because it's already too close. It's also because he's been off, but this cannot be a field goal game because that plays into the Steelers' strategy. And the third thing, and I really liked what Bart Scott said this morning on Get Up. He said the Steelers will go with an all-out run blitz on first and second down. And so their what they want to do is shut down Derrick Henry because everybody keeps because he was in a debate with somebody on Get Up, maybe it was Greeny, and they were like, "But you have Derrick Henry. Why aren't you using him? Why aren't you using him?" He said, and Bart said, "You don't understand. The Steelers are purposely trying to make them one-dimensional to where they do that rushing blitz on first and second to try to get you into third and long. That's part of their formula." And so, and I completely agree because you can't rely on Justin Tucker. And right now you can't rely on, you have to score points with Lamar Jackson. He's going to have to put on the cape and throw a little bit on first and second down or run off of scrambles. Let's not run. Let's get out there and run if we need to. He's going to have to complete a couple of passes on first and second to get them to stop rushing or doing those rush blitzes. So you got to score points with Lamar early. He's got to put his cape on. I know it's a lot to ask of him, but that's what the Ravens are going to have to do. And then if you are able to loosen up that defense and get a bit of a lead, then you can win with Derrick Henry later in the third and fourth quarter. But early on, Lamar's got to put on the cape, and that was the formula that Bart Scott put out this morning, and I agree with him.
How about a hot start, too? Remember, Derrick Henry fumbled on that opening possession the first time around. So ball security, of course, will be at a premium. Lamar Jackson, having an answer, having, as Dan Orlovsky always talks about, having a plan for pressure. You already know the disguises, the late rotations, everything that Mike Tomlin's going to be throwing at him. There's going to be heavy variety. And I'm not saying Lamar is going to be surprised by anything because these two opponents know each other better than anybody, arguably, in the entire league. I'm just saying, how will you answer to that kind of pressure? And what's the quick game going to look like? And who are your targets going to be in the quick game? So 2 other matchups, and then we'll move off of this. And Zone's telling me the stadium's going to be packed. LOL, this ain't Cleveland. Zone, it's a hot ticket. When it's a hot ticket, sometimes people make business decisions. That's all I'm saying. And Pittsburgh travels really well. Again, this is an expensive ticket. This is Christmas weekend and Ravens Steelers in December. So the 2 matchups that I really want to take a close look at coming up tomorrow is Highsmith on Stanley and Rosengarten on a potentially 75% Watt. That, I mean, right there in the trenches there. That so heavy factors right there. Can Rosengarten hang in there? How much chipping will he need? And Highsmith, he's got a motor. Again, he did not play in that Week 11 game like Brooke confirmed.
Mm-hmm.
And they are very deep. They go deep in the outside linebacker room. So
yep,
really good stuff. I see a lot of Eileen
we haven't gotten to super chats at all today. We got to get there.
Yeah, we haven't. Tila says 27-17. Blackula says 27-9. Major Media 35-13. Troy Gale says 24-16. Same thing for Julian. Good stuff, guys. Appreciate that. Let's get to some super chats. Samuel says, I think Lamar uses his legs in this game. 21-14. Baltimore. I'll let you take Gerald.
Our homage giveaway winner earlier this week, Ali versus Frazier. It has to be constant haymakers.
Gerald, your order was placed last night. Appreciate you, man. Zach says the strange ending will be a Tucker game winner in overtime. And what's funny about that, Sarah, that will be strange, won't it?
That will be strange because I literally just said, do not make this a Justin Tucker game. Do not do it.
That would be strange. It used to be, routine. And another one from Zach for you.
This week's wide receiver situation makes Deontay Johnson look way worse.
You better believe it. So you feel like an open door that was left unopened. Isaiah says, bad offensive line. Defense fell off earlier. Has had games with more touchdowns than incompletions. Beat Allen earlier. More value there. Is that referencing
MVP
Lamar's value? Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Gotcha. And I'll let you take Lindsay's for a 20 spot.
There we go, Lindsay. I wish the media would present all this together. Lamar has better stats while playing a greater strength of schedule and having to overcome poor play by his team. These alone might not be enough, but together, clear MVP. I actually was looking up just this morning strength of schedule. The Ravens have definitely performed better against teams that are above 500, and I'm going to show that stat in quick hits. But strength of schedule, I may need to look into it a little bit more, but it actually seemed kind of close more recently. And they did get that signature win against the number 1 seed in the Lions, but let's just not forget what their defense is.
It's my turn to take this one, but you're taking it because of the first word.
Okay, well, listen. As you guys know, I'm a competitive person, and Bobby knows I didn't let this go yesterday.
Continue.
You spell woe, W-O-A-H, or it could be W-H-O-A, okay? It is not W-O-E. So I'm going to stand on principle, and I'm going to pronounce it the way I think it should be pronounced, especially when you put a bunch of E's in a row. Like, it's not a silent E, right? If it's one E, it's a silent E. Okay. But if you put 4 E's there, don't you think you should emphasize the E?
Say it for us.
I'm going to do it. Anytime somebody writes it this way, I'm going to pronounce it the way I think it should be pronounced. Woo-wee, dummy.
The one piece of pushback I have there
Give it to me.
Is wouldn't it be a double O? If it was a double O, I'd feel better about the woo.
Okay, well, what about then it would be woey.
See where I'm at with that? If there's a double O, then I'm with you. But to me, I still probably would have went with whoa.
Well, I would still say then woey, because you're putting all the E's there. You're putting all the E's there. Like if you want it to be O, then put the O's 4 times. So I'm pronouncing the O forever.
OG Perlet. You see what you've done?
And listen, and wait, I didn't finish reading the whole thing.
That's right.
Also, I've got the dictionary on my side. Woe is spelled W-H-O-A, or another acceptable one is W-O-A-H.
Can't
okay.
make this stuff
anyway, doing this again. Woo-wee, dummy. Happy Friday, flock. The NFL flexing the Bills-Pats game to push Allen narrative is nasty. We'll get what matters most in February, though. There we go.
Sounds like our nasty agenda title.
I put some personality into these super chats.
Aha. Tony writes, blocking all around. Blocking.
Keep Lamar
no
clean.
question.
Keep them clean.
Here is a look at the AFC playoff picture after last night's Chargers come from behind win, Sarah, that took down the Denver Broncos 34-27. And take a look at the second tier. 2 of the teams that I just referenced are right there with the Ravens. 9-5 is Baltimore, and 9-6 are the Chargers and the Broncos, squarely not in the hunt. They are squarely in the wild card conversation. In the hunt, Indy, Miami, and Cincy. And, of course, the division leaders entering Week 16, Kansas City, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and Houston. Ravens, of course, see the Texans coming up on Christmas Day.
Bobby, here's what's crazy is we're talking about this game in terms of the AFC North, and we're all but, in fair that we're all but considering the Ravens in the playoffs, even though that hasn't officially happened yet. But let's just not forget, not only is the AFC North on the line, but if the Ravens were also to fall to 9-6, like you're putting your wild card seeding in jeopardy. Because these other 2 are already at 9-6. But if the season started today, it would still be Ravens of the 4th seed against the 5th seed, or excuse me, the 5th seed is against the 4th seed of the Houston Texans. But what was crazy last night, if you guys didn't get a chance to check out the game, is the Broncos were soundly in control of the game throughout the first half. And what turned it was this whole thing. So Jim Harbaugh has been trying to be I don't know if he's the first coach or one of the first coaches to be able to take advantage of the fair, what's the name of it? I can't remember, but basically you get to kick a field goal if somebody else fouls you while I really should have gotten the lingo on all of this.
I got you. So,
what is it called? The first fair catch.
All right. First, fair catch kick. Jim Harbaugh considers the obscure fair catch kick to be his favorite. Chargers coach had the opportunity to try one Thursday night for only the second time in his career. This time, his kicker got 3 points from one of the most unusual plays in the sport. Cameron Dicker nailing it.
So what happened is his defense stopped the Broncos with 8 seconds left. And you'd think, okay, well, let's just kill the clock. But instead he called the timeout. Like it would have been the end of the first half, but he calls a timeout with 8 seconds left, makes them punt. His punt returner calls a fair catch, but he gets hit. And so the rule is that if you get hit, you can extend the period by either snapping the ball from scrimmage or attempting a fair catch kick. So that's what they did is they kicked it. They got 3 points. They were supposed to be down by like double digits going into the half. And that changed all momentum and they end up winning. And look at this guy, Gus Edwards, after J.K. Dobbins goes down. I was seeing tweets from Chargers fans being like, why is he get the next man up? It should be somebody else. Gus Edwards, had 2 big runs in the end. He had 68 yards, 50 yards after contact, 3 missed tackles forced, 2 touchdowns. I mean, he went off last night. So that was like the Gus Edwards we've seen before when he comes up in relief of J.K. Dobbins, and he was just breaking tackles all over with the Broncos defense.
Well, I'll tell you what, too, Ladd McConkey, their rookie out of Georgia, he's really evolving as a pass catcher for them. He had a game-high 6 receptions for 87 yards. He was kind of the name that was floating around the Ravens, if you remember back in draft season. So they've developed him quickly. He's become a playmaker for them. I thought Herbert in the second half was exceptional. The numbers may not necessarily show it, but he was really, really impactful for them. And so Chargers squarely in the conversation. And like you said, just even more of a heightened sense of urgency for the Ravens, because if you lose, it starts to get really, really muddy, being how many teams are around them, around that 9-10 win category. And some more quick hits before we jump. Patrick Mahomes has been removed officially from the injury report, so he'll be good to go this weekend for Kansas City. And what'd you bring in here from Bill Barnwell?
Bill Barnwell looked at each franchise in the NFL, their worst decision from the last 5 years. He picked the Ravens signing Odell Beckham Jr. to the 1-year, $15 million contract.
Jeez, not Earl Thomas?
Is Earl Thomas within the last 5 years?
Yeah, 2019.
2019. Okay. Yeah, no, and what's funny is like obviously they didn't get their money's worth out of him. And many people had already been like, wait, why would you give this much to a guy that hasn't had a 1,000-yard season for a minute and had the injury? And so if you just look at the money for the production, agreed, it was a bad signing. We have to remember back to what was going on. And Lamar and the Ravens were in their own contract negotiations that seemed to last for an eternity. And Lamar specifically had pointed to OBJ as a guy he'd like to sign him and Hopkins. And so this was widely viewed as the Ravens showing some type of goodwill to Lamar and showing him that they will, give him the targets that he's requested, along with them figuring out the money of all of it. But everybody was like, this is a massive move and message to Lamar. And so for that reason alone, and we said it at the time, this is a lot of money for a guy that hasn't produced for a minute, but you're getting him, 1, to get Lamar locked up, and 2, in the playoffs, but his playoff production wasn't much either. So
yeah, I don't know if I'm with him here, but
what's that?
I don't know if I'm fully with him here. I mean, clearly it's probably one or the other, right? Odell or Earl. You'd have to kind of do a deeper dive in terms of.
I'm guessing he's looking at pure production because Earl at least started but he got
Earl had a Pro Bowl year.
King Henry, right? Did he get a double? Was that Earl and King Henry, where King Henry gave him a double stiff arm on the same play? Was that Henry who did that?
He got rocked, but that was in the middle of people forget that was in the middle of a Pro Bowl year. So Earl had a Pro Bowl year, his first season with the Ravens. And then, of course, everything happened the 2020 summer. Remember that disaster? But yeah, that's obviously the most notable play.
Oh, Nick is pointing out, and he might be actually right over both of them. Marcus Williams.
Yeah, that's got to be in the conversation.
That's a massive contract. And whether it was due to injury or poor play, he just has not started much at all.
Yeah.
I would definitely put that over Odell Beckham Jr.
I would as well. I would go Earl. I would go Earl, Marcus, Odell. That's what I would do.
Marcus, Odell. Okay.
Yeah. One more here, and this was your graphic.
Yeah, this is what I was just referencing earlier. The graphic says, does your team just beat up on bad teams? And so they're looking at the point differentials versus teams above 500 and below. The Ravens' point differential against teams with a record above 500 is plus 66. Bobby, nobody comes close. The number 2 team is the Philadelphia Eagles with a plus 32. The Ravens double that. They double it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Bills, which a lot of fans will point this out in the MVP race, the Bills have a plus 6 against teams above 500. Check this out, because the Bills and Ravens are right next to each other. When you go against teams below 500, the Ravens are a respectable plus 20, but I mean, they're playing down a little bit, right? And they obviously lost to the Raiders and the Browns, but they're still a plus 20 over teams below 500. The Bills are the definition of beating up on bad teams. They're a plus 129 for teams below, a plus 6 above 500. Yep. Now, look, their record is still better. It is what it is. The point differential doesn't help you with your record, but it's why people say the Ravens have so much going for them if they would just stop the penalties and the mistakes, because they literally can dominate even the best teams.
There's a big if there. A couple more super chats before we jump, and I'll let you take this one.
This is OG Pearled again. Says, not whoa or woo. It's whoa. Yeah, it's whoa like ho, but with a W. No, I get that, but you're not spelling it right. Sorry.
Oh, man. And Brian says he's big on Deontay. He's big on Deontay. He's a talent that didn't get opportunities. He got 5 targets. Lamar was 1 for 5 when targeting Deontay. I get being big on him because he's a man beater. He has been a productive complimentary wide receiver in this league, but I'm of the belief that the Ravens didn't owe him anything.
No, here's my thing is he would have gotten, I think he would have had this would be a better argument from Brian if he didn't deny himself of opportunities. The biggest opportunity that was in his hands, if he wanted it, was against the Eagles. And then it would have been followed up when Bateman has now subsequently been hurt. And
Nelson, literally the guy that was wide receiver 3, isn't even available.
So it's like it's a fair point, but then he erased his own fair point by saying, no, I don't want the opportunity when it presented itself.
So potentially 3 things that he left on the table going into this weekend had he answered the bell when his number was called. 1, an opportunity to show that he's worthy of another contract in this league, whether it be in Baltimore or elsewhere. 2, if Bateman can't go, potential wide receiver 2 workload. And 3, a shot at potentially revenge from his former team and keeping them away from the AFC North.
Yep.
Stuff.
He'd be huge right now.
It's a shame. It's really
everybody would be talking about him right now.
It's a shame for him, and it's a shame for the Ravens. So appreciate you guys for hanging out with us. Awesome show, awesome week, very productive week. Please like the video if you enjoyed today's content. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, email us. We'd love to hear from you. BaltimoreRavensVault@gmail.com. We don't always get back to every single one of them. We try to read every single one of them. The homage giveaway will be a week from today. If you're looking into that for the t-shirt giveaway, congratulations to this week's winner, Gerald. What else? Oh, somebody asked earlier on, will I be at the game? You know my game day duties. I'll be at the Baltimore Around Town tailgate at 2:30. That's when my show starts, and then I race across town to come to the studio so that Sarah and I can do our in-game note taking. Anything else?
Just that I appreciate you and think you're great.
Likewise.
And I look forward to tomorrow's post-game show.
Likewise. Me too.
And I enjoyed today's show. I enjoyed Brooke. I think she's great. I appreciate Cam Newton.
Yeah.
Bring in Stephen A. The arguments we've been having here inside the vault. I like it. Make him answer for it. That was a good discussion.
He brought it, didn't he? Cam has brought it. So what else? You can join the Vault Patreon community at patreon.com/RavensVault podcast. If you want to donate to the channel in other ways besides Patreon, super chats, donations, you see the Venmo tag up on the screen. We appreciate you guys. And I think that'll do it. So I'll be on the lookout for our game preview. If you tuned in late, we will have a specific pull out of this episode with Brooke Pryor. So looking forward to having that up. And again, as we've been reminding you in recent weeks, there is a new playlist when you go to our homepage on the Vault's YouTube homepage. It's called the best of small condensed clips, typically within 10 to 20 minutes, somewhere in there. Great way of hopefully catering to our, maybe shorter attention span portion of the audience. I guess that's a fair way of putting it. So appreciate you guys as always.
Fair catch, free kick. That was the 4 words I wanted to put together and completely fumbled the bag. Fair catch, free kick.
Okay.
Just wanted to get that out there.
You know, it's funny too. You had the tweet up there, but you were so concentrated on it.
No, but they didn't say it like that.
Did it in the tweet? I think Chris had the name in it. Yeah.
Really? Wait a minute. Go back.
We used to have him on that. We used to have him on that too. We had him on Chargers week.
Fair catch,
free
kick.
Kick,
you're right.
Right there.
It's right there.
When you're grinding the way we do, sometimes you're multitasking. You got no clue what's up on the screen. I've done it so many times.
Oh, man.
So many times.
Humbled.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks so much. Thanks to Brooke Pryor. For Sarah Ellison, I'm Bobby Trossett signing off in this Friday Ravens Lunch Hour live stream. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Pre-game starts at 2:30 with me on the Bobby Baltimore channel. Sarah and I will be back inside the vault, typically around 8:30, 8 o'clock, depending on how this Ravens-Steelers game matches up. So, as always, we appreciate you for hanging, and thanks for joining us here inside the vault.